Most people have been told that once fat builds up in the liver, it's a slow, almost hopeless process to undo. I want to challenge that belief right away because it's not just outdated, it's discouraging people from taking action that could help them far sooner than they expect. The liver is not like scarred muscle or worn out joints. It is one of the most resilient, regenerative organs in the human body. In fact, your liver is constantly rebuilding itself every single day, even while you're listening to me right now. That's not optimism, that's biology. When fat accumulates in the liver, what's really happening is not permanent damage at first. It's congestion. Think of it like a busy highway during rush hour. Cars aren't broken, the road isn't destroyed, traffic is just backed up because the signals are out of sync. Fatty liver is very similar. The liver gets overwhelmed by excess fuel coming in, mostly sugar and refined carbohydrates, and its normal fat processing pathways slow down. Fat piles up not because the liver is weak, but because it's overloaded. Here's the hopeful part. When you remove the pressure, traffic starts moving again. Research shows that liver fat can begin to decrease in a matter of days once the metabolic signals improve. Not months, not years, days. That surprises many people, including those who've lived with this diagnosis for a long time, but it makes sense when you understand that the liver's job is to adapt. It evolved to survive feast and famine, to store fuel when necessary and release it when conditions change. Fatty liver develops when the body thinks it's stuck in a constant feast. Another misconception is that fatty liver means the liver cells are already badly damaged. In early and even moderate NAFLD, the cells are still alive and capable of recovery. They're swollen with fat droplets, not destroyed. When the metabolic environment improves, those fat droplets can be mobilized and burned for energy. This is why studies using imaging techniques show dramatic reductions in liver fat even before blood tests fully normalize. The liver responds first because it's at the center of metabolism. I often hear people say, but I've had this for years, so it must be permanent. Duration doesn't always equal damage. What matters more is whether inflammation and scarring have taken over. In many cases, especially when people catch this before cirrhosis, the liver is simply asking for relief. Remove the constant sugar spikes, calm insulin resistance, and reduce inflammatory stress, and the liver eagerly shifts into repair mode. It's almost as if it's been waiting for permission. This is also why the fastest improvements don't always come from extreme measures. You don't need to punish your body. You need to support its natural design. The liver already knows how to heal. The key is to stop interfering with that process. When insulin levels fall, when the liver isn't forced to turn excess sugar into fat all day long, enzymes involved in fat burning switch back on. Mitochondria, the tiny power plants inside liver cells, become more efficient again. That's when fat starts leaving the liver quietly and steadily. Another encouraging fact is that the liver prioritizes its own survival. When conditions improve, it directs energy toward detoxification, inflammation control, and tissue repair before almost anything else. That's why people sometimes feel better, more energy, clearer thinking, before their lab numbers even change. The liver is offloading its burden. This momentum matters because early progress reinforces habits and builds confidence, which then leads to even greater improvements. So if you've been told that fatty liver is a slow, inevitable slide toward worse outcomes, I want you to reframe that story. This condition develops silently, but it also responds quietly and quickly when you change the signals you're sending your body. The liver doesn't need motivation, it needs the right environment. And once that environment shifts, healing is not the exception, it's the default. Now, once we understand that the liver can unload fat faster than we were led to believe, the next question becomes obvious: what's actually causing that fat to get stuck there in the first place? Most people assume it's dietary fat. They're told to avoid eggs, oils, meat, anything rich or satisfying. But this is where the story takes a surprising turn, because the science points in a very different direction. The real driver behind fatty liver isn't fat on your plate. It's sugar in your bloodstream and the hormonal chaos that follows. Every time you eat something that rapidly turns into glucose, your blood sugar rises. Your body responds by releasing insulin, a hormone designed to move that glucose into cells for energy. That system works beautifully when insulin is released occasionally. The problem is what happens when insulin is triggered all day long, meal after meal, snack after snack. The liver, which acts as the body's metabolic control center, gets the message that energy is constantly abundant. When that happens, it starts converting excess sugar into fat through a process called de novo lipogenesis. That fat doesn't come from what you ate. It's manufactured inside your liver. Over time, constant insulin exposure makes liver cells less responsive. This is insulin resistance, and it's at the heart of NAFLD. When the liver becomes insulin resistant, it paradoxically keeps producing fat while losing the ability to export it efficiently. Fat builds up, inflammation rises, and metabolic signals become even more distorted. This is why fatty liver is so closely linked to type 2 diabetes, high triglycerides, and abdominal weight gain. They're not separate problems. They're different symptoms of the same underlying imbalance. One of the most misunderstood aspects of this process is fructose. Unlike glucose, fructose is processed almost entirely by the liver. When fructose intake is high, especially from sweetened beverages, fruit juices, and processed foods, the liver is forced to handle a metabolic overload. It turns that fructose directly into fat at a much higher rate than glucose. This is why even people who don't eat much fat can still develop fatty liver if their diet is high in sugar. The liver simply has no other place to put that excess fuel. What makes this even more deceptive is that insulin resistance doesn't always show up clearly on standard blood tests early on. Someone can have normal fasting glucose and still be driving liver fat accumulation every day through repeated insulin spikes. That's why so many people are shocked by a fatty liver diagnosis. They didn't feel sick, they weren't eating junk food all the time, but their liver was quietly absorbing the metabolic consequences. Here's the hopeful shift. When you reduce sugar load and calm insulin signaling, the liver rapidly changes behavior. Insulin levels fall, fat production slows, fat export improves, the liver switches from storage mode back into fat burning mode. This is why improvements in liver fat often occur before dramatic weight loss. You're correcting a hormonal signal, not just burning calories. The body responds quickly when the signal is clear. This also explains why simply cutting calories without addressing sugar and refined carbohydrates often fails. You can eat less and still spike insulin repeatedly. You can lose weight and still have fatty liver. The liver doesn't respond to willpower, it responds to chemistry. When the chemistry improves, the results follow naturally. That's why focusing on food quality and metabolic impact matters more than obsessing over numbers. Once insulin resistance begins to reverse, something remarkable happens. The liver regains flexibility. It can store energy when needed and release it when appropriate. Inflammation quiets down, blood fat levels improve, and the risk of progression to more serious liver disease drops sharply. This isn't about perfection, it's about removing the constant metabolic noise that keeps the liver trapped. So when we talk about the fastest way to reverse fatty liver, we're really talking about restoring the liver's ability to listen to insulin again. Turn down the sugar signal, and the liver remembers exactly what to do. Once insulin signaling begins to calm and the liver stops being pushed into non-stop fat storage, the next question people always ask is, so what should I actually eat? This is where things become empowering because food is not just fuel, food is information. Every bite sends chemical messages that tell your liver whether to store fat, burn it, or repair itself. When you choose the right foods, you're not waiting passively for healing to happen. You're actively turning it on. Certain whole foods directly reduce liver fat by improving how the liver handles energy. Take foods rich in polyphenols, for example. These natural compounds help quiet inflammation and improve insulin sensitivity inside liver cells. Berries, green tea, dark leafy vegetables, and even dark chocolate with high cocoa content all fall into this category. These foods help the liver process fat more efficiently while protecting liver cells from oxidative stress. That matters because oxidative stress is what pushes simple fatty liver toward inflammation and scarring. Healthy fats play a surprisingly positive role here as well. When you replace refined carbohydrates with fats from sources like extra virgin olive oil, nuts, seeds, and fatty fish, the liver gets a different signal. These fats don't spike insulin, they actually help reduce it. Omega-3 fats in particular have been shown to lower liver fat and triglyceride levels while calming inflammation. Instead of being afraid of fat, the liver uses these fats to restore balance. Protein also deserves attention, especially as we age. Adequate protein supports muscle mass, which improves overall insulin sensitivity and takes pressure off the liver. Foods like legumes, eggs, yogurt, fish, and lean meats help stabilize blood sugar and reduce cravings for refined carbohydrates. When protein is evenly distributed across meals, insulin spikes become smaller and less frequent, giving the liver longer periods to burn stored fat. Fiber may be one of the most underappreciated tools for liver repair. Soluble fiber feeds beneficial gut bacteria, which produce compounds that reduce inflammation and improve metabolic health. Fiber also slows the absorption of sugar into the bloodstream, preventing sharp insulin surges. Vegetables, beans, oats, flaxseed, and chia seeds all help in this way. A healthier gut means fewer toxins and inflammatory signals reaching the liver through the bloodstream, which lightens the liver's workload. Even timing matters. Eating patterns that allow periods of lower insulin, such as finishing dinner earlier in the evening, give the liver uninterrupted time to process and export fat. This isn't about rigid fasting rules. It's about respecting the liver's natural rhythm. When insulin stays low overnight, the liver shifts into cleanup mode, breaking down stored fat and repairing cellular damage. What's powerful about this approach is how quickly the body responds. People often notice changes in energy, digestion, and mental clarity within days of adjusting food choices. That's the liver responding to a friendlier environment. Blood markers may follow more slowly, but the metabolic shift happens first, and once it starts, it tends to build momentum. This is also where consistency matters more than intensity. You don't need exotic superfoods or extreme restrictions. You need reliable signals day after day. Whole, minimally processed foods tell the liver that the environment is safe and stable. Ultra-processed foods tell it to brace for chaos. The liver adapts to whichever message it hears most often. So when we talk about food as medicine, this isn't a metaphor. It's a biological reality. The liver listens to what you eat, responds to it, and adjusts its behavior accordingly. Choose foods that support repair, and the liver responds with healing. One of the most liberating truths about fatty liver is this: you do not have to wait for the scale to move before your liver starts to heal. For decades, people have been told that weight loss is the primary solution, and while overall health can certainly benefit from losing excess weight, the liver doesn't operate on bathroom scale logic. It operates on metabolic signals, and those signals can change long before your body size does. The liver is uniquely sensitive to hormonal and nutrient cues. When insulin levels fall and inflammation begins to quiet, the liver starts exporting fat and burning it for energy almost immediately. This can happen even if body weight stays the same. Imaging studies have shown that liver fat can drop significantly within weeks without dramatic weight loss. That surprises people, but it shouldn't. The liver is prioritizing its own survival and function before the rest of the body reshapes itself. Weight loss often lags behind liver improvement because the body defends its fat stores, especially as we age. Hormones shift, muscle mass declines, and metabolic rate changes. But liver fat is different from subcutaneous fat under the skin. It's more metabolically active and more responsive to changes in insulin and sugar intake. When those signals improve, liver fat is among the first to go. That's good news because reducing liver fat early lowers the risk of inflammation, fibrosis, and progression to more serious disease. Focusing too heavily on weight can actually slow progress. When people chase rapid weight loss through extreme calorie restriction, the body interprets that as stress. Stress hormones rise, insulin sensitivity can worsen, and muscle mass may be lost. Losing muscle further impairs glucose control, placing more burden on the liver. In contrast, strategies that improve metabolic health, better food choices, stable blood sugar, gentle movement, support liver healing even if weight changes are modest or slow. This distinction is especially important for older adults. After 60, weight loss becomes harder and sometimes counterproductive if it leads to frailty. But liver repair remains highly achievable. Improving food quality, protein intake, and insulin sensitivity can reduce liver fat while preserving strength and energy. The goal isn't to shrink the body at all costs. It's to restore metabolic flexibility. Another reason the scale can be misleading is fluid shifts and glycogen storage. When people reduce refined carbohydrates, the body releases stored glycogen along with water. Weight may drop quickly at first and plateau. Meanwhile, liver fat may continue to decline quietly in the background. If someone gets discouraged by a plateau and abandons the process, they may miss ongoing internal improvements that matter far more than a number. This is why measuring success by how you feel and how your body functions is so important. Better energy, improved digestion, clearer thinking, and more stable blood sugar are all signs that the liver is responding. Blood markers like triglycerides and liver enzymes often improve before weight changes become obvious. These internal shifts reduce long-term risk even if the mirror doesn't change right away. When people understand that liver healing doesn't require dramatic weight loss, adherence improves. There's less frustration, less self-blame, and more confidence. And confidence matters because sustainable change depends on believing that what you're doing is working. The liver rewards consistency, not perfection. So if you've been stuck thinking that nothing counts unless the scale goes down, it's time to update that mindset. Your liver is not waiting for you to be thinner, it's waiting for you to change the signals it receives, and when you do, it responds without hesitation. Even when insulin signaling improves and food choices start supporting repair, there's another layer that often gets overlooked, and it can quietly slow everything down if it's not addressed. The liver doesn't exist in isolation. It sits at the crossroads of your immune system, your gut, and your environment. When those systems are inflamed or overloaded, the liver is forced to divert energy away from healing and toward damage control. Let's start with inflammation. Fatty liver doesn't become dangerous simply because fat is present. The real threat begins when that fat becomes inflamed. Chronic, low-grade inflammation keeps liver cells under constant stress, making it harder for them to unload fat and repair themselves. This inflammation often doesn't come from the liver alone. It's frequently driven by signals arriving from elsewhere in the body, especially the gut. The gut and the liver are directly connected through what's called the portal vein. Everything absorbed from your digestive tract passes straight to the liver first. That's efficient when the gut barrier is healthy, but when the gut lining becomes permeable, sometimes called a leaky gut, bacterial fragments and toxins slip through more easily. The liver then has to neutralize these substances, triggering immune responses and inflammation. Even a perfectly designed diet struggles to work if the liver is constantly fighting incoming fires. Certain foods and lifestyle factors weaken the gut barrier over time. Ultra-processed foods, excess alcohol, chronic stress, poor sleep, and low fiber intake all disrupt gut integrity. When the gut becomes inflamed, the liver pays the price. The immune system stays activated, inflammatory chemicals circulate, and liver fat becomes more toxic instead of inert. This is one of the key reasons fatty liver can progress even when calorie intake doesn't seem excessive. Then there's the issue of toxins. Your liver is the body's primary detoxification organ. It processes chemicals from food packaging, air pollution, pesticides, medications, and household products. In small amounts, the liver handles this beautifully. But chronic exposure adds to the burden. When detox pathways are overwhelmed, the liver prioritizes survival tasks over fat metabolism. Fat accumulates not because the liver is failing, but because it's busy protecting you. What's encouraging is that reducing this burden doesn't require living in a bubble. Simple steps can dramatically lower inflammatory load. Increasing fiber supports beneficial gut bacteria, which strengthen the gut barrier and produce anti-inflammatory compounds. Fermented foods help diversify the microbiome. Adequate sleep allows immune signals to reset, manage it. Stress lowers cortisol, which otherwise worsens gut permeability and insulin resistance. These aren't side issues. They directly influence how quickly the liver can heal. Inflammation is also tightly linked to oxidative stress. When liver cells are overloaded with fat and toxins, they generate reactive molecules that damage cellular structures. Antioxidant-rich foods help neutralize this stress. This is why colorful vegetables, herbs, spices, and teas matter so much. They don't just nourish the body, they protect liver cells while repair is underway. As inflammation quiets and gut health improves, something important shifts. The liver stops receiving constant danger signals. Immune activity becomes more balanced. Fat stored in the liver becomes less toxic and easier to mobilize. Healing accelerates, not because you added something extreme, but because you removed obstacles. This perspective also helps explain why progress can stall unexpectedly. Someone may eat well and manage sugar intake but still struggle if sleep is poor, stress is chronic, or environmental exposure remains high. The liver can only heal as fast as its overall load allows. lighten the load, and the pace of recovery increases. What ties all of this together is respect for the liver's role. It's not just a fat processing organ, it's a defender, a filter, and a regulator. When you support the gut, calm inflammation, and reduce toxic exposure, you're giving the liver breathing room. And when the liver has room to breathe, it does what it's always been designed to do: restore balance and protect your future. At this point, it should be clear that reversing fatty liver isn't about a single dramatic intervention. It's about stacking small, consistent habits that quietly multiply each other's effects. This is where people often underestimate their power. They think healing requires more effort, more restriction, more force. In reality, the liver responds best to rhythm and reliability. Small daily behaviors create long stretches of low insulin, low inflammation, and metabolic calm, and that's when healing accelerates. One of the most powerful habits is simply how and when you eat. Giving your body predictable breaks from food allows insulin levels to fall and stay low long enough for the liver to switch into fat burning mode. Finishing dinner a bit earlier in the evening, avoiding late night snacking, and allowing a consistent overnight fasting window gives the liver uninterrupted time to do its work. This isn't about hunger or deprivation, it's about respecting the body's natural cycles. When food intake aligns with daylight and rest aligns with night, metabolic signals become clearer and more efficient. Movement is another underestimated multiplier. You don't need intense workouts to improve liver health. In fact, gentle, regular movement is often more effective. Walking after meals helps muscles absorb glucose without needing as much insulin, reducing the load on the liver. Light resistance exercises preserve muscle mass, which improves insulin sensitivity throughout the body. Every time your muscles use glucose efficiently, the liver is spared from converting excess sugar into fat. Movement doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be consistent. Sleep may be the most overlooked factor of all. Poor sleep raises stress hormones, worsens insulin resistance, increases appetite for sugary foods, and disrupts gut health. All of these effects converge on the liver. When sleep improves, insulin sensitivity often improves without any other changes. The liver uses sleep time to regulate detox pathways and repair cellular damage. Protecting sleep isn't a luxury, it's metabolic medicine. Stress management also plays a direct role. Chronic stress keeps cortisol elevated, which signals the liver to release glucose and store fat, even when it's not needed. Stress also weakens the gut barrier and increases inflammation. Simple practices like slow breathing, time outdoors, social connection, or moments of quiet can lower stress hormones enough to change metabolic outcomes. You don't need to eliminate stress, you need to interrupt it regularly. Hydration matters more than people realize. Adequate water supports blood flow through the liver and kidneys, helping remove waste products efficiently. When dehydration is present, detox processes slow down and fatigue increases, making healthy choices harder. Drinking water consistently throughout the day supports every metabolic process the liver depends on. What makes these habits so powerful is how they reinforce one another. Better sleep improves insulin sensitivity. Better insulin sensitivity makes food choices easier. Gentle movement improves sleep. Lower stress improves gut health. The liver benefits from every one of these shifts, even when none of them seem dramatic on their own. This is why medications often struggle to compete with lifestyle patterns. They can't replicate synergy. Perhaps the most important habit is patience paired with confidence. The liver doesn't heal on a rigid schedule, but it responds reliably to improved conditions. When people trust the process and stay consistent, improvements accumulate beneath the surface long before they're obvious, and those internal changes are what protect against progression to serious disease. So if you're looking for the fastest path forward, don't chase extremes, build daily signals your liver can trust, and it will repay you with recovery.